Welcome everyone to Automation Airwaves. Your host Scott Teeple, and we're going to try out a kind of a new kind of series, a talk session here where we're going to discuss intelligent automation, what it is, the futures of, and kind of just the overall general discussions around the industry and in this space. So with me to my right here is Peter Tarrant. He's one of our excellent architects in delivery into what is intelligent automation. We've got Ken Andrews has been on the show quite a few times, so it's always great to have you as our Director of Professional Services. And then Darren Munn, he's our sales executive and all things and how we handle intelligent automation out into the space. So welcome to the program here today, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So what is intelligent automation, integrated automation? I'm not entirely sure that these terms are used congruently, conditionally, right? There's all kind of overlapping and what is and what isn't when you hear, I think some vendors call it connected RPA, some call it automation platform. There's a lot of said confusion kind of in this space, and I think there's a point of position that Agilify has within the 15 years collectively in the market and what we've been doing. And what it really means to us. This series, this channel, will be a really deep dive into, I think, some of the nuances around that. So what is intelligent automation to Agilify? As we've worked through several of our clients and really extending the way that we look at automation today, RPA, RDA, really that task-based automation, we get to a point where some of the low-hanging fruits, where it's, we're trying to get the initial ROI right out of the gate, where we're looking at really providing the values up front, some things start to slow down within your program. We start looking at, okay, what are other ways that we're going to extend the capabilities within, we start looking at the tools and how do we extend. We start looking at people, process, technologies. We start looking at, there's got to be more. We're hearing a lot of buzz around ML, artificial intelligence, how we're going to bring cognitive, right? This I got to be first, and if I don't get it today, I'm going to be left in this market. Should I skip RPA and RDA and go right into ML? Should I go right into artificial intelligence? Isn't that the future of what this thing is? But how does Agilify define intelligent automation? I kind of go back to our founder, Lee Coulter, and he produced an article where he really did a great job in defining some of these terms, but really being, I think, the forefront of IEEE and setting the stage for what this could be and should be. But really, when we talk about end-to-end business process without much human interaction, but let's not get mixed up in the marketing terms of what it is. So when we look at intelligent automation within Agilify, and how we define it, we're really looking at how do we bring the automated tasks, the task-based automation, and transforming that into a roles-based. When we start looking at the human, right? We always talk about how significant it is to really look at the human. But if you take a look at a human, we really can look at it in multi-parts: the brain, the cognitive, the thoughts, the MLs. Then we've got the eyes, we've got the image processing, the NLP. Then you start looking at the orchestration or the brain, the nervous system. How do we actually make decisions and then get those decisions down through the muscles? And then the hands-on keyboard, the RPA, the RDA, when the actual work gets done, which is great. And when we look at the tools that are out there that are really helping us get there, we're starting to see a lot of maturity and how those are really coming to market. I wouldn't say that we're quite there yet, especially when we look at ML, right? Especially narrow AI versus a broader general AI. But we're starting to get some really nice headway. And when we start really looking at how do we start piecing these things together, things get really fun. But we can't forget about the most important part of what we're doing here, and that's really focused on the human, and that translations from task-based and to roles-based. So I guess that's how we would define it within this. But let's talk a little bit about technology for a second. As I talked about some tools that are kind of being out there that are kind of laying the landscape of what are some really great things in the turn of the technology that we're seeing in this space that's helping us get to more of a complete intelligent automation space.
I think the reason why the term integrated is being thrown out there so much is because there's so many partnerships forming. Strategic partnerships, people buying other companies and bringing them in. So now you don't have just RPA by itself. RPA is now saying we can go out and do a cloud NLP or OCR. We can have a partnership that does have a machine learning component that you send something out to a machine learning interface and you can bring it back and consume it. So that the term integrated is being thrown out because there is some level of integration being done. And that's the evolution. We're not just sole independent little tools that are living by themselves anymore. They are growing and maturing and realizing that there's a trajectory that needs to be aimed at.
Yeah, and for me, that I'm even taking it a little bit deeper. We talk about integrated technology or integrated automation. Something that there was a paper back in the '60s by Harold Levitt, I believe, that talked about the overlap between people, processes, and technology, and the inherent need for those to overlap. When we talk about our automation solutions within Agilify, we identify the three components: people, the actual hands-on, the task-based, the actual processes, and the technology. So, I think from an industry standpoint, I agree with you. But I would just suggest that there's also more to integrated automation than just the technology solutions out there. And it certainly makes sense from the definition standpoint from where you're going, and I think that's where the confusion is in the industry when we think about that. And that's the first thing I thought. I was like, that sounds like a term that's been around for quite a while. What were the components then? And it seems like it applies to how Agilify is tackling that the solutions that we provide to our clients. So I'm just interjecting that as we continue on in our discussion here, that we don't focus just on the technology.
It is extremely interesting when you look at the technology side of things and you look at the orchestration or the BPMs, right? This core requirement around workflow. And how do I generally process? And how do I get things into it? And how do I control how things are really moving through it, right? Then you get that integration out to where hands-on keyboard, where I'm actually doing things on the physical side of things, whether it's an API or it's through screen scraping or whatever we call, the RPA space. And then you've got the vision side of it, where now I can start doing some really great things with smart OCR, with image recognition. But then as I get some of that data and I'm starting able to apply some of my knowledge and ML, I'm starting to now get into a predictive state where now I'm starting to pass things through that orchestration engine. And again, back to your point, well, that's awesome when we're just looking at it from a technology perspective. Things are really starting to get fun. But where do we come into when we start looking at, okay, that's the technology piece, but now we've got the process piece and what really is going on, and then the human side, that's this people, which is a phenomenal place. And I think the value that we really are getting, or what we're seeing when we're delivering intelligent automation, is in the inherent change and how users are interacting with this new system, right? You could make arguments, or I can make arguments, that isn't that just really a unified desktop? Right? Am I really just replacing systems of record and creating a whole new way of doing the work? But I'm really, creating a new user interface. You say, well, I don't think so, because at the end of the day, we're leaving the systems of record. We're leaving them all in place, right? This isn't a rip and replace. It's not a 3-year, $40 million project to redo these things like it used to be back in the day. If I now am leaving things alone and I'm really just looking at the role, and how do I continue to process things in a different way, leaving all the systems where they're supposed to be, right? Because it's too costly to make those changes. And I start layering some of this new technology to assist while things really get powerful. Darren, could you kind of just take us through a little bit of our use case with, I think it's Redilo fixed asset, and some of the experiences that you're seeing as we discuss this.
Yeah, and before I talk about Redilo fixed assets, I want to talk about the customer landscape that we're seeing on the sales side. All these different technologies really are almost as if they're building blocks, right? So we're going to start with the RPAs, the RDAs, then we're going to start to add in machine learning, the cognitive learning. Eventually we'll get to AI, whatever that might mean to you. But most of our customers are still focused on kind of back office processing, the RPA space, right? We've got a couple of customers that are starting to mature, including one of our largest customers, and that's where we start to introduce this concept of Redilo fixed assets. And fixed assets is a process that's from end to end very ripe for this integrated automation concept, right? We've got a lot of human interaction, but also a lot of back office processing, data gathering, things like that. So really stepping back and looking at the way that a user is working throughout an entire day, reimagining a day in the life of what is Redilo, and kind of trying to tie all of those things together. So recognizing that we can't completely eliminate the human to date, but rather giving them all of the tools, whether it's existing RPA, RDA solutions, kind of tying them all together, maybe creating some APIs or leveraging some APIs and creating some custom SQL queries, right? And kind of pulling all those things together to present a user with an interface, the orchestration layer, and all the information they need to be able to make decisions in real time. Once you can kind of get to that point, then you can start layering in machine learning, cognitive learning, to make those next best action decisions. So a lot of our customers are going in that direction, but I think most often we're finding that some customers do come to us and say, hey, I'm brand new to automation, tell me about AI. And trying to walk them backwards and help them understand the framework that we need to establish to get to that point.
Yeah, the building blocks, right? And
Exactly.
There's probably hundreds of articles over the last year that really dive into data is king. Data. However you want to splice this thing out, right? And if you don't have that data, my recommendation is you don't start looking at cognitive, or you don't start looking at machine learning, or you don't start looking into a knowledge domain of narrow AI until you've confident that not only do you have a business process that is ready for it, but then you have the data to even support it. But how do you get the data if you don't have it today? Well, that's what we've been talking about for the last 4 years, within these channels, is around RPA and RDA, because it starts building out the corpus of the data modeling that you need to really start laying the foundation for what you need to move forward.
But the paradigm shift of the Redilo use case was the fact that we knew that there's no way that we could pull the human out of it. There's too much research, there's too many decisions, there's too much that needed to be done in the fixed asset and capitalizing assets in that space to try to cut the human out. So we went into the design by looking at, okay, not how do we minimize the human impact, how do we maximize the human impact?
Exactly.
How do we bring everything to the human and then enable the human to make more decisions instead of doing more of the rote keying? So it was a flip in paradigm that really made that stand out to the customer.
Yeah, I think it's a critical point here is that within your RDA and your RPA program, within the beginning stages of identification of process automation, you say, hey, these are ripe for automation today because we can get to the business logic, we can get to the rules, we can get to that task.
Quick, yeah.
All the things that go in to support that task, let's put those off to the side and let's not focus on those today. There's going to be a moment in time, Peter, to your point, it's like, hey, it's time for us to start looking at these. How do we start layering back in those human touch elements, those things that we need cognitive support for, or I need visualization in a decision or something, right? And that, to what we did with our customers was we said, hey, let's not just put those off to the side, but how do we start factoring that into how we actually start creating what would be an intelligent automation solution moving forward? So
I think it's worth noting too that we didn't start there with this large customer of ours. We started way down in the back office, lots of RPA, as I mentioned earlier. You don't just show up on day one and start building this end-to-end Redilo type solution with all of these baked in ML AI type solutions and keeping the human at the forefront, like Peter mentioned. There's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, we already had the editing a fixed asset automation in place. We already had the creating a new project automation in place. All of those RPAs that were down at the task level were then used and utilized and brought in front of the human now for them to orchestrate and for them to say, I want to do this in real time. Okay, I've made the decision, now go do it. And they're not doing the keying, they already have this library of automations to work from, which a lot of companies do now in the market. They've been automating all of these processes, all these tasks. Sometimes we hear numbers of hundreds and things along those lines. All of those can now be leveraged if you draw them together in the right way, because really what we're finding is you can't do intelligent automation without a human, because the human is still the most intelligent being in the room.
Starts with them.
yeah,
Right.
at least today.
At least today.
At least today, right? I mean, that's the promise, right? And I think that's the joke, and I want to continue to bring up the joke, right? Like, artificial intelligence is the future. That's not a joke. That is the truth. However, today, it doesn't exist, right? We're making some great efforts. There's some really great tools that we've partnered with. There's a lot of great companies that are really out there solving this. And again, data is king, and the knowledge domain that needs to be there to be able to support decision, next best actions, if you will. We're making some great progress, but until we really get a complete picture around the problem statement itself, and do we have the data, I don't know that we'll get there today, tomorrow, maybe in the next couple of decades, but definitely making some great strides to get there. So I love one of the elements of intelligent automation that is near and dear to my heart is around this human and digital workforce merging. Right, Ken, I know that you're awfully passionate about this, as we're really looking at, for our customers, this transition of taking the bot out of the human, I guess, if you will, or taking the mundane out. And as a supervisor, it's really awesome that now I don't have to have the human element to do some of these data processing things, but it really is starting to create a scenario where I now used to be able to manage just a person to do the work, but now I've got this separation. Now I have this digital worker that's kind of doing this. Within an intelligent automation space, we start having the abilities to collect data in a whole new way, to start harnessing the power of that data piece. Is there any thing that you can share within how the digital worker and the human worker and the supervisor really continues to work in this space?
It's interesting you bring it up from a supervisor and a manager standpoint, but really the focus needs to go down to the associate that did the process previously. The full adoption has to happen at that level, and then it trickles back up. Oftentimes, we'll have conversations around, they feel like it's a solution that they put in place and it kind of just goes away. And now IT's managing it for them, and they don't have to worry about it except for the outcome, except when it doesn't work, just like an associate not coming to work. What do we do? Oftentimes there's additional strain on your automation program. There's additional strain with the relationship with your IT component. And where we're forgetting that those are actually associates, digital associates that are working for that same supervisor in the same capacity, providing the same functionality in that process that was defined within the business. So we want to make sure that we still focus on that layer, and that starts with that adoption early with the folks that are actually involved in creating the process. But then we also want to take it one level further, and that is once we make that initial step, who are we including? Are we including the right people? Have we made an effort to include those supervisors in the solutioning? Have we provided the training required around the delivery to be successful? A lot of times, we buy these technologies off the shelf. We're like, it'll fix this problem. Sweet, everybody goes for it. IT puts it in. There's a select few that know how it works. The problem is that when things go wrong, and they will, how do we recover from them? How do we make sure that there are, BCP, there's continuity plans in place for the organization to continue to function, because it's not their core business. Automation is not their core business. It's what they do. So we want to make sure that we're including that in our approach. And once we talk about integrated automation again, it's a big component. We're always focusing on the solutioning, and that's why I love hanging out with Peter, because it's just wonderful. In my mind, I'm thinking, okay, the what ifs, the back end pieces. How do we keep it going? We've put the solution in. We've gone after the RPA and RDA solutions. Now we're looking at a much bigger program decision. Have we brought everybody along with us for that journey? Do we have to retool or re-engage with them and teach them how to think as we take it into a bigger, as we increase the spectrum of what it's going to actually solve? And so, there's a people component of that I focus on. I think it's why we see our customers return time and time again, is because they realize that they get to this little point in their journey, and they kind of get stuck, and they're like, hey, what do we do? I'm like, well, that's we need to get past this level. You're ready for the next step, but are your associates, are your people component of your organization ready?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and this is probably the subject of your channel that you're getting ready to launch, right? Is organizational change management. How are you going to handle that now that you've got it in place? So stay tuned for that channel. That was a great promo for yourself. I think it's perfect.
Too subtle, was it?
Yeah, no, it's perfect, because I think it drives a lot of conversation that is critical to the success of the overall program. And maybe we've said it maybe too much, but maybe we're going to continue to say it, that the human is so important. Like if we're not really addressing and taking care of our employees and how, not only in the change, but how we're going to enhance, how do we make that transition from task-based automation into roles-based automation? We'll likely get into a whole series around that. When you really start breaking down the core pieces of an intelligent automation program or an integrated automation, we're looking at, again, the AI piece, the narrow AI or the brainstem, if you will. We're looking at the orchestration, how we're bringing that together, whether that's workflow management, tool suites, or some kind of BPM. As we really start getting into the hands and how the execution is working, the RPA space, but then into the visualization and how not only is the user interacting with that, but also and how are we taking some of the advancements in cognitive and image recognition and to really start enhancing how all of that kind of works. So a lot more channels actually coming, or at least episodes coming out of that to really drive more great conversations. So the Redilo Fixed Asset case study is out there for download. Should be a link at the bottom. We also have a new white paper coming out specifically on this topic that will help hopefully drive some more conversations. And if there's any comments or any feedback, please don't hesitate to put them into whatever the media is at the bottom, whether it's LinkedIn or on our website. But thanks for coming in, guys. I really appreciate the dialogue and looking forward to the next several sessions as we dive in deeper into the topic. Thanks.
Thank you.